make up the Auburn hire. I lived here in the state of Alabama and had several different people give me their take. My take on it is that you're getting in my opinion, you're getting the same thing that you just fired.
Well, there's a lot of different reasons why coaches are attractive. Basically, they run some kind of system that they're known for, whether that's on offense, typically on offense these days, not on defense, because I think one of the key components would be hire an offensive mind, and then he hires an extremely strong defensive coordinator, like a Will Muschamp kind of guy that can just take over the defense. But anyway, or a guy that obviously there's got to be some kind of component there that people know why that coach is what he is. With Bryan Harsin, I got to admit, I would never sit here and say I'm some sort of expert on Group of 5 football because I just don't have the time to watch it. So I see Boise State play, one game a year, 1.5 games a year, whatever. So when they hired Bryan Harsin, the only thing I know is that, other coaches built Boise State to what they are. And Boise State's an amazing program. If you really think about where they're located and what they accomplish and what they're able to do outside the conference on a regular basis and who they can compete with, it's amazing what's happened at Boise State. But that was Houston Nutt, and that was Dan Hawkins and Chris Petersen, and those guys built that program. I don't know that Bryan Harsin really did anything besides take it over and not ruin it and just continue to win 10 or 11 games a year, just like his predecessors did. He didn't have to build it. It's known now for what it is, and I'm sure he learned a lot from those guys and what they established. So he's got a nice record. The record's really good at Boise State, but I thought, he's not known as, certain guys are known. When Chip Kelly went to UCLA or even before that in the NFL, well, he's got this innovative offense. This is what he's known for. And this is what we're getting. With Bryan Harsin, I don't know of anything that he's done or anything that he's known for that is anything special. So I thought I wasn't super excited about the hire. Like this is an amazing hire. And obviously there's not a fit there. It's not like he's a Southeastern guy or has ties to the SEC. He does not. It's not like when Dan Mullen went back to Florida. He knows the campus, the program. He has relationships there. They love him there. And he's coming back home to where he was a coordinator. So Dan Mullen's a good fit at Florida. It's not that. You don't have that. He's got to learn a lot about the SEC. He's got to learn a lot about Auburn. He doesn't have any natural connections there. So obviously his hires on offense and defense, Derek Mason and the like, are huge. To compare him to Gus Malzahn, I don't know where you're going there, but I'm not saying that that's a bad comparison or it doesn't make any sense. I just don't know what comparison you're making.
The only point I'm trying to make is I think that you're going to get the same results with Bryan Harsin as you got with Malzahn. You're going to be mediocre. You're going to win some games, some seasons. You're going to win eight or 9 games, but you're never going to push them over the top where they need to be back to win. Let's say a Cam Newton type of year, where you have a very competitive football team. We can compete for championships. I just don't see anything in his coaching resume that suggests that he's going to be any better than Malzahn was.
Well, not to divert off your topic here, Hunter, but there's nothing in Steve Sarkisian's track record that indicates that he's going to win at Texas. So why did they hire him? If anything, Bryan Harsin's been much more successful than Steve Sarkisian. Steve Sarkisian's won 60% of his games at 2 schools that have had coaches win a ton more than that since he left. So to compare Steve Sarkisian at Washington versus Chris Petersen, who then took it over and made it a playoff team and a Pac-12, the best program in the Pac-12, even Clay Helton, who gets criticized from everybody, has been more successful at USC than Steve Sarkisian was there. So I didn't understand that hire except for the Saban factor. and the wow factor of the offense that he's been running, which obviously has to do with the best talent in the country too. So not to divert from your point, but let me ask you this. How do you view the Auburn job? Because I think there are certain programs across the country that we would have no debate on how great a job it is or what a marginal job it is. But Auburn's kind of like, you could make pros and cons about it being a great job, a top 10 job, or you could make comments and point to it being less than that.
Maybe it's just me being in the state of Alabama and being, an SEC fan, but I view Auburn as a top 10 job. I don't know exactly where I would rate that in the top 10, but I would say it's a top 10 job.
Okay.
At least, let me counter out to your point for a second. Let me defend Texas a little bit here. In Texas' situation, at least you can see that Sarkisian's a great offensive mind.
Yeah.
And at least you can see some brilliance there. And the Saban factor being under Saban, I think they give him better knowledge and know how to structure a program.
Yep.
And gives them a model, so to speak. I just thought that Auburn would hire somebody with a little bit more of a better resume than Bryan Harsin. I thought they would try to hire somebody who's had some established success in a big Power 5 conference.
Okay.
Some capacity, some sort of capacity as a coach.
Yeah, so I made the same distinction about Sarkisian when I made my analysis a number of times in different venues. When he was hired, I just made the criticism of his coaching resume at Washington and USC versus his predecessors and successors at those two schools. So he did worse than both. But on the other hand, I made the same 2 points that you just made. Anybody who gets the stamp of approval from Nick Saban, and I'm not saying that it's not justified. It's justified. If Nick Saban says you're tremendous at what you do, plus on top of that, what you just stated, that you have to, if you're a coach that wants to achieve and aspire to better things, and you're aware and you're hungry and eager to learn, man, you're in the best place you can possibly be in the country to learn from the best on, okay, I made these mistakes and I ran these programs this way. Now I'm going to get to see that I was doing okay. I did about 70% of the things right, but now I get to learn from the best and see what he does and basically just model what he did, take it to Texas. So he probably sold himself, or they were sold on that aspect of it. I think it's legit. I'm just saying that Steve Sarkisian didn't, from a record standpoint, didn't achieve anything at Washington and USC that 50 other guys couldn't do. Where Bryan Harsin.
Oh, I 100% agree with that point that you're making about his previous head coaching, success. I don't know. I just thought that maybe Auburn would have had a little bit of a better, somebody with a little bit better resume, as far as that goes.
Like,
I get your criticism. Maybe a Chris Petersen, or try to go after Ohio State's offensive coordinator. Clemson's offensive coordinator. Somebody like that who's had some success at a program. I don't know. I just
sure.
Can't only point to a few different names, but
yeah.
I just thought that job was more coveted than it seems to be. It just didn't make a lot of sense to me.
Well, it seems to be a pretty common trend that the up-and-comers at the Group of 5 level are the guys that get big coaching jobs. And so he fits that. And I didn't know until this all came about that he had been offered all sorts of, and I can't name any schools. I just heard this commented on during the broadcast of the Auburn Bowl game, that he had been offered and was in the mix for a number of jobs through the years, high-level jobs. But see, the only thing that would back me off of Chris Petersen, for example, and I know you're not selling Chris Petersen, it's just a name that came to mind. And he's great. I used to rank Chris Petersen as one of the 3 or 4 best coaches in the country. When he left Washington, he made the statement, and maybe I'm putting too much on this, but it really resonated with me, that he was just burnt out, and just the grind of having to try to build a championship program from a recruiting standpoint and everything else. It was just a grind. He was just burnt out. So I can't imagine him going from Washington, where, sure, Washington tries. They want to win. They pour a lot of money into football. And they've been very successful. But the pressure to win.
They made it to the playoffs against Alabama.
Yeah. Washington can be a tremendous program, but obviously they're not at a place where they're expected. They have to win. They're not at Oklahoma, Ohio State, where you have to win. If Coach goes to Washington, he could probably survive for quite a while going 8-4, and they're not going to go crazy. But for Chris Petersen, if that really dragged him down to go to Auburn and have to run up against Jimbo and Saban and Ogeron and those programs. But to your point, I get your point. You would expect that a accomplished Power 5 coach would be in the running for the Auburn job. The name that always comes to mind,
There's a name.
I was just going to say Matt Campbell of Iowa State is the guy that I first and foremost think of.
Well, let me throw another name out there, and I think I'm surprised that nobody's trying to hire, because I've watched what he's been able to do, and I'm going to get your take on this. The NC State head coach, that guy. Okay, you're talking about a program that is done for where it's located in the country, and where in the conference that he's in. He's done a very good job. I mean, for the situation that he's in. I mean, he's a pretty good recruiter. He's been ranked in the top 25, I think, 3 times in the last 4 years. I mean, I'm surprised there's nobody's trying to hire him. If I was Auburn, I'd be trying to hire him. If I'm Auburn's AD, I'm reaching out to him.
Really?
And yeah, I think he's a great coach. I mean, I think he's a good coach.
Okay.
I'm not going to say great yet,
right.
But I think he's a good coach. I think he's been able to do. He's done some things that I don't think anybody expected him to be able to do at NC State. They're not a great football team, but for the conference that they're in and everything that surrounds them, South Carolina and Clemson, they've done a pretty good job. I mean, he's done a pretty good job with that program. So I'm surprised that he got a bigger job.
Well, it's funny that you bring up Dave Doeren, Hunter, because I posted a video on Dave Doeren and my evaluation of his job there at NC State and what he's done maybe 6 months ago. You should give that a look. So here's my thought on Dave Doeren. How long you been watching college football?
My whole life.
So what, the last 20 years? How long has that been?
Well, 25. I'm 25. So.
Okay. Been watching college football for 15 years, let's say. Okay.
Yeah.
What has NC State been during that time, regardless of who the head coach is? And my answer for you, and just pipe up if you agree or disagree, that NC State, for the entire time I've been watching college football, which has been a lot longer, they've been the same thing regardless of who's been the head coach. Sure, if they had a slightly better year or worse year, but basically NC State's been 7-5, 8-4 forever, for 40, 45 years. 8-4, 7-5, consistently. They go to bad bowl games. They go to mid-tier bowl games. That's what they do. Okay. I looked at Dave Doeren's tenure which was this was prior to this season, and they had a good season this year. They went 8-3, lost a bowl game, so 8-4. I looked at his tenure there. So they play in arguably the worst conference in America. I think there's a debate there. I don't think it's definitely the worst. But his record going into this season in the ACC was, get this, 21-35. He was winning 37% of his games in the ACC. 37% of his games. Now, I'm not talking about going 500. 37. He was 14 games under 500. So this year he went, 7-3. So knock that down. He's 10 games under 500 in the conference in 8 years. The reason NC State goes to bowl games, if you look at their records and their schedule year to year, this is their formula. They go 3-5 in the ACC, which is almost exactly what it projects out, exactly to 21-35. They go 3-5 in the ACC, and then they load up on a awful non-conference schedule. The only team that they've played during his 8 years out of conference that's any good out of conference is Notre Dame, and that's because they were forced to by the ACC contract. They play East Carolina over and over, and William and Mary over and over, and James Madison over and over, and all these awful Group of 5 and FCS schools that boost their record so that they can go to bowl games. And that's their formula. He is 1-17 against top 25 teams since he's been the coach at NC State. So I just don't see where Dave Doeren has done anything. I think he's been worse than the previous coaches at NC State.
Well, now that you put it into that context, I wasn't aware of those statistics until you just mentioned them. Well, yeah, and I guess that puts it in perspective a little bit more for me. I guess of hearing those statistics. Hey, okay, that changes my perspective a little bit.
And when I do that, I don't in any way want to slam the guy. I'm just presenting the statistics and then putting it into context, as you just mentioned. That's important to put things into context. There might be other underlying reasons why he hasn't done that well at NC State. But again, he's pretty much doing what every other NC State coach has done, is basically go 7-5 every year. And again, obviously better and worse than that. But when you put it all together, he's basically going 7-5 and going 3-5 in the conference. And pretty much everybody's done that at NC State, if not better. I'm going to put my Dave Doeren video in the chat here if anybody cares to check out my Dave Doeren video. But
well, too, and maybe it's to his defense a little bit. I mean, they're a basketball school. I mean, they got a pretty decent, basketball program there. So, I mean, maybe the commitment to football isn't what it is at, let's say, Florida State or a Clemson or a program like that. So there might be some other underlying, things like you just mentioned that could be keeping him from being any more successful than what he has been. But he has done for the school that he's at over the last 3 years, he's done a decent job of recruiting there. For what given the situation that he's in, I think he's done better than expected in that area.
I think their recruiting rankings, I don't know off the top of my head. I'm guessing they're in the mid-30s to low 40s.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that.
But anyway, my only point was that I just thought the Auburn would have made a little bit of a more better hire than what they did, and we'll see. We'll can do. I'm not going to, I'm not going to really judge him until he has, produced a product on the field. So we'll see. Do you think there's any thought to possibly Tennessee hiring Gus Malzahn? I've heard some talk of that. Do you think there's any stock in that?
So you said Auburn. Do you mean Tennessee?
Yeah, Tennessee hiring Malzahn.
I think that Tennessee needs to hire. I'm just going to give you kind of rough, intangible qualifications. The guy that they hire needs to be a guy that inspires, a guy that is just a strong, strong leader, because he's going to have to fight through a lot. He's going to have to endure a lot. He's going to have to lift that program through a lot. Gus Malzahn doesn't strike me as that guy. I think he's a very capable coach, but it depends on who they can get. Gus Malzahn may be at the top of the list of guys that will actually take the job. I'd like to see somebody with a little bit more fire than Gus Malzahn at Tennessee.
Yeah, I just don't know how much interest is in that job right now. I mean, with the kind of a mess that they're in, I don't know, who would really want to step up and fill that role. Maybe a Billy Napier or somebody like that.
Sure.
But I just don't know who would want to take on that mess. That is Tennessee football right now. But we'll see. We'll see where they go with this and who they end up